Why have we come to earth? Do you remember? Why have we taken birth? Do you remember?
My first car was a 1950 Cadillac hearse. Didn't know that about me, did you? Some people are saying, oh, that tells us a whole lot. Am I on? Am I on? Okay. So good morning. Happy 5th of July, which is the day after the 4th of July. So happy Independence Day weekend. Yes. Do you know that John Adams actually wanted the Independence Day celebration to be on July the 2nd, because that was the actual day that they signed or voted for, the actual Declaration of Independence. So anywhere around here is a good day to celebrate. We can be free from things, and we can be free to be things. And sometimes it takes a little of both, doesn't it? To be aware of what we don't want and what we do want. At the morning service, Reverend Mary mentioned, I think you kind of mentioned a little bit here, that this is just a normal Reading 4th of July weekend, right? Hot, sunny, yeah. Where I used to live up in Seattle, today, the 5th of July, was always considered the first day of summer. It was after the 4th of July fireworks got rained out, and it had rained all the way from the previous October. Today was the official first day of summer, because normally the 5th of July was sunny for the first time. This year they're having a little different experience. They're having more of a Reading experience. And they're not comfortable with it. They're not comfortable with 90 degrees in Seattle at this time of year. I know. When I was up there a few weeks ago, it was 78, and they were upset, Of course, they don't have air conditioning. Of course, we don't really have too effective an air conditioning right now either. So, but anyways, I wanted to say that we get used to what's normal for us, don't we? We get used to what's normal, and if it changes, we get upset. You ever noticed? If life shifts and becomes a little uncomfortable, we become uncomfortable. So, a little over a couple hundred years ago, 407 years ago, and then some more, a couple centuries, a bunch of people got together and decided they didn't like the status quo of the way things were here in this country. They were uncomfortable with the way things are. Because sometimes the way things are also makes us uncomfortable when we have a voice within us that is trying to go for something bigger. Have you experienced that? I hope you have. As religious scientists, I hope you have experienced that there's something more that wants to come out, and the status quo doesn't always do it. So they wrote this little thing called the Declaration of Independence. And it starts off saying what they didn't want in their lives. That's kind of the first full sentence, full paragraph. And then they said what they did want. And I love this statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Isn't that a great vision? That's the vision for our country. That's the vision on which we're founded. That's the vision of that freedom and equality for all on which we're founded. Now, like most visions, how many of you have ever had a vision, kind of comes to you, and first of all, it scares you, right? Yes? Okay. See, this vision scared these guys because as John Adams was supposed to have said right after they signed it, said, now we all need to hang together, and Benjamin Franklin said, yeah, otherwise we're going to hang alone. Okay? Because their lives were on the line when they signed this document. Their lives were on the line. Some of them didn't survive. Some of them lost, they survived, but they lost everything they owned or everything they held dear. They paid some high prices for this. And sometimes we have to pay a price for our freedom. And the price is oftentimes an internal price, and sometimes it's an external price. Things shift, things change in our lives. Have you noticed that? We have to let go of things that no longer serve us. And sometimes they're the things that we really wanted to hang on to. But the vision also, sometimes when we state it, we don't understand the full vision. This was the case here where they wrote that all men are created equal. And what they meant in the day that they wrote that was all white, landed, landowners, the gentry, were created equal. That was the original intention. That was who was writing it, and that was what they meant. Okay? By the time that the war was over, in fact, before that century was over, several of them said, you know what? That vision is so big that I can't say that all men are created equal and be a slave owner anymore. And so they started freeing slaves, some of them. They started to catch a vision. They started to catch that the vision was bigger than the one they originally wrote, or what they thought it was when they originally wrote it. In 1848, a group of women gathered in Seneca, New York, the Seneca Convention, which was the first convention that started, where women started to say collectively that we deserve rights too. We deserve the right to vote. And they said this Declaration of Independence should say all people are created equal. I like that one. How about you? Yeah. Today, that is the intention. Abraham Lincoln was a champion of this particular line. It's what he walked through when the slave owners were trying to say, we should be able to maintain slavery. And he says, we have in our Declaration of Independence. He read it into the Constitution, so it would be part of that. And say that all people are created equal. We can't hold slaves and call all people equal. So a vision is something that grows on us. A vision is something that we ourselves have to grow into in order to encompass it, in order to let it have its way with us. Have you noticed that about your vision? Sometimes your vision is so big and scary, and you finally have to turn it over and say, you know what? I'm willing to let God have its way with me with this vision. I'm willing to let this vision have its way with me. Because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how I'm doing it. And I'm willing and I surrender. Take a breath. Because sometimes that's scary, isn't it? Sometimes it's scary to surrender to those visions. Religious science, Ernest Holmes had a vision. We have a kind of a foundational statement that's similar to that. Craig read part of it earlier from the later chapters, but the very first page of the Science of Mind textbook, freedom was very important to Ernest. This is a religion, of course, the teaching that was founded in the United States of America based on some of the writings and thinkers of the United States of America. And so he says, Ernest says, the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, and of a freedom which the soul craves. Our souls crave that freedom, right? Yes? Your soul. My soul. Even if we shut down, even if we don't want to remember it, it's still sitting there kind of going underneath the stuff, right? You've noticed? Okay, it craves that freedom. And what Ernest tells us and teaches us is this freedom comes from listening to our inner voice, from listening to that wisdom within. It doesn't come from outward actions. It doesn't come from completely remodeling your life or your house or anything else. It comes from listening to the inner voice. A few years before Ernest, a guy named Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else is added." It's that inner voice. Do we take the time to listen to the inner voice and allow it to free us? Because it will guide us into that freedom. Establishing our freedom is similar to establishing our country's freedom. It's not an easy process. Have you noticed? Some of you, a few of you. It's dangerous. Or at least it feels dangerous, right? Take a breath. We have to say no to what we don't want. And sometimes that's hard. Our inner beliefs are our own British Empire. Or if you're a Star Wars fan like I am, they're the Empire. But our own inner beliefs are the Empire. They hold us back. They want to keep us stuck and keep us in place. That's their job. Okay? They intimidate us. Right? Just stay safe. If it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Life is good. What more do you want? Everything's okay. Don't you want too much? Who do you think you are? Don't get too big for your britches. How many people got told, don't get too big for your britches when you were kids? Right? Do we want our kids to grow? I mean, physically, we all got bigger than those old britches, right? I hope. Those old beliefs intimidate us. They tell us that we can't survive without them. They tell us stories and images of fear, of isolation, fear, poverty. You don't have to put your hand up, but I know somebody in this room besides me has had the fear of ending up as a bag person sleeping under a bridge, right? Okay? Somewhere in their lives, they've had that fear. So we get all these wonderful images. Or I'll die alone, lonely. Nobody to care for me. Breathe. I've got to hang on to this job for my retirement, my pension. They tell us we're not good enough. They tell us we're fundamentally flawed. They tell us all this garbage, right? You've heard it. At the relationships class I'm teaching on Wednesday nights, I invited the students this week to stand naked and look in the mirror and say, I love you, a number of times. This is actually an old Louise Hay process that she tells people to do. Just stand naked in front of a full-length mirror and just look at yourself and say, I love you. And that will bring out, take a breath, that will bring out a whole lot for most people, right? Especially women, right? Because you know that your body isn't perfect no matter how perfect it is. Because you got conditioned with that when you were very young. I remember when I was in a personal growth seminar many couple centuries ago. I'm really old. A couple decades ago. There was this gorgeous young woman in there, strawberry blonde, one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. And everybody, all the guys were paying attention to her, you know. And so I was one of the staff members of it, and on the Saturday night of the seminar, there's a big exercise that takes place that usually pops people wide open, and Sunday morning there's oftentimes this really deep sharing that would go on during that seminar. And so Sunday morning I was in the back with a couple of other staff members. We were preparing some handouts for the group, and we had the curtains closed. I couldn't see what was out there. And all of a sudden I hear this sharing, and it's like, I don't think I'm very attractive. And I really feel, ugly, and just, and I'm sitting there looking at the other guy back there, and I go, no, that can't be. And we're both like pulling the curtains apart and looking, and there she is up on the stage, sharing about how unattractive she looks. And all the rest of the people in the room are going, So we have this condition within us, right? We're never good enough. There's always that little extra fat, that little extra wrinkle. Guys have it too, we just don't like to talk about it as much. And so we look in the mirror of life, and we listen to our voices. We think about the life we'd like to have, and we get those little voices, the redcoats, come and say, nah, you don't deserve that. Stay in place. Mind your business. It'll all work out if you just stay comfortable. Anybody besides me? Yes. And then the wonderful news is these voices get mirrored by other people back to us, right? Since the universe is a mirror to us, what we believe is what we put back, what comes back to us. what is our normal, we tend to attract people around us for whom that is their normal. And we all share in this consciousness. That's why you come to a place like this, is because we don't share in this consciousness. We're here to break that consciousness open, right? Okay? So that's why you hang out with people like this who believe in the highest and greatest good for you. It takes courage to become free of these voices. It takes guts. That's what our founding fathers and mothers had, was guts. They had courage. They had to give it all. And then the good news is, the really good news is, even if you have courage and go for your freedom, nothing is guaranteed. The United States of America at the time, when it got established, was called the Great Experiment. It was the great experiment in democracy. Would it work? It had never been done on the planet before in any kind of a decent-sized country. Would it work? And you know what? We're still answering that question today, aren't we? Will it work? And sometimes we look around today and say, it looks like the wheels are coming off the bus. And we wonder if it's going to work. And the answer to that question is, it will work if we choose for it to work. Because we are the consciousness that establishes what this country is. I love religious science because it teaches that there is freedom. In other words, you can do what you want under law, as Ernest Holmes describes it. And under law, the law that he talks about is simply the law of cause and effect, that what I put out comes back to me. So yeah, I have the freedom to be a nasty jerk, but what's going to come back to me is nasty jerkness. Is that a word? I'm sure it is. It must be. I just made it up. If Michael Beckwith can make up words, I can make up words. Are you willing to be part of the great experiment, both nationally and in your own life? And what it takes is choosing that freedom. At the time of the Declaration of Independence was written and going on ongoing after that, there were two factions in the country, basically. One was the revolutionaries, the ones who wanted freedom from England, and the other one was the Tories. And the Tories were the conservatives who did not want freedom. They wanted everything to stay the same. They were good. Sure, they had to pay tax on their business, but they were making a good bit of money. Their lives was comfortable. Everything was okay. Let's just keep it the same. Their motto was God, King, and Country. Just keep it status quo. Now, in our version of history, the one that was written by the people who won the Revolutionary War, the Tories were the bad guys, right? The revolutionaries were the good guys. I'm going to propose that we need both in our life. We need a little Toriness, right? A little conservative. A little thing to keep us from going crazy. Both these factions exist within us. And we need both the desire to change and the balance to not go off the deep edge. So we don't want to hide under our security blankets the rest of our lives. I think of Linus from the Peanuts cartoon. Gotta have my security blanket all the time. Okay? But we also don't want to be Thelma and Louise. Great freedom that goes over the cliff, right? Okay? We don't need to do that either. We want to have a balance. We want to have a balance. And we gain that balance by listening to that inner voice, because it guides us into what is our freedom practice. Listening to that inner voice is our freedom practice. Listening to that voice that knows how to do it, that knows more than I do. Believe it or not, there's a voice that knows more than I do. Me too. Just ask Cynthia. Mary finds out this morning that there's a voice that knows how to light candles better than she does. I can only laugh because in my past I've tried to blow out those candles. Just because you're a minister does not mean you know everything about everything, right? So there's this inner voice that guides us. And if we listen to it, it will guide us not into a revolution where we trash everything in our lives, but into an evolution where we start to grow in a more gentle way. Wouldn't that be more enjoyable? We don't have to go out and kill the bad guys. When we start to recognize that there are no bad guys. They don't exist out there, and they don't exist within here. And we start to realize within here that there are no bad guys, and we don't have to kill off parts of ourselves. I recently heard somebody say, I've got to squash this part of myself. And I wanted to say, don't. You might want to channel it into a way that's healthy in its expression, but you don't have to squash it. Just makes a big mess, is that what you said? Makes a big puddle. We've had a lot of examples in history of freedom that was established with war, with anger, with separation, with all that stuff, with high drama and trauma, right? You know, you read most of the history books of most of the nations, and a lot of them were established that way. You know, God bless Gandhi, he decided to go a different path. And some other people have tried that also. We've seen how that's done, and we've seen the results of that. We do that sometimes in our relationships, don't we? Where we have to trash the other person and trash the whole relationship. We do that with jobs. We do that with other aspects of our lives. Now, I know you guys don't, but maybe in your past, before you ever walked into a church like this, or maybe you've got a cousin who does that, right? You've seen this done. Okay? What if we learned a new way? What if we could learn a new example to apply both within ourselves and to that which is outside of ourselves? What if we learned a process of listening, of balance, of respect? How would that be different? See, growth in nature doesn't happen by revolution. Have you noticed that the acorn doesn't go from an acorn to an oak tree overnight? Okay? Redwoods take a little time. You know? Even the butterfly, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, there's a process. What if we could get involved in that process? What if instead of doing the revolution, the tear it all apart, tear it all down method, which of course makes for great movies, doesn't it? Good reading in books, but not so much fun to live, right? You know, our vision of freedom inspired a number of other visions of freedom. You know, France, you know, probably just a couple of decades after us, and I think some heads rolled, if I remember right, in France. We don't have to cut off the heads of our own lives, of our own aspects of ourselves. When we start to recognize the universe out there is a mirror, and we're just playing with a mirror, we don't have to kill off aspects of ourselves to get free. So I want to try something different. So what if instead of being at war with ourselves and each other, we created interdependence? Would that be okay? Some people say, maybe. I'm not too sure about this idea. Have you noticed that despite our great American dream that we're all so independent, I call it the John Wayne syndrome, have you noticed that we kind of depend on each other? I didn't build my car. Don't know how to build my car. Didn't pave the road. Didn't build this church. Even the people who did kind of work together, no one person came up and, I wasn't here, but you were, you know, built all the walls and made all the chairs and made the carpet and then laid the carpet, right? We're kind of interdependent on each other. A few years ago, a friend of mine, Reverend Trish Hall, wrote a declaration of interdependence that I thought might be interesting to listen to. And what she says about this is, July 4th is a lot more than a long weekend of festivities. It's about a group of people taking a stand for their beliefs. In 2002, I pulled out a copy of our Declaration of Independence. It is truly an awesome declaration of severance in order to experience freedom. freedom from oppression. It wasn't undertaken until the level of frustration and anger had reached explosive proportions. There is a part of me that can't but wonder what the course of history might have been if, long before the oppression and resulting hostility, all parties had granted respect to one another, released their attachment to greed, avarice, and dominance, and awakened to the interrelatedness of all aspects of life on this planet. Pondering this, I composed a Declaration of Interdependence, which was later printed in the Science of Mind magazine and beyond. And so this is the declaration. When in the course of human events, it becomes obvious that the recognition of the interconnectedness of all expressions of the divine has been overlooked or misunderstood by great numbers of people, it becomes necessary to declare these truths to be self-evident. We, the people of consciousness, hereby declare there is only one indescribable infinite that is the creator of all that exists in the visible and invisible world. We choose to recognize this indescribably infinite as God. The indescribable infinite is the life essence of all that is, since it has created all that is from itself. It is the spirit within all creation. There is one cosmology, which the indescribable infinite has been and is expressing. That cosmology consists of the entire universe as we understand it and beyond, and all that is within those universes. God as Spirit is fully within all of its creation, and its creation is wholly within it. We are one with and inseparable from God and all of its creation. What if that was our declaration? What if that was our way that we lived life from? How would your life look different? How would all of our lives look different? Take a breath. Sometimes we have to separate from our past selves or our past patterns in order to express our greater freedom. But there's ways to do that either with great fighting and struggle or with love and respect. How would it be if we could do that with love and respect? How would it be if we could do it with compassion and gentleness? Would that be different than the way that we've been doing it in the past? And would that affect the collective consciousness of all around us? If we stop believing in that has to be a big struggle and a big war. So this week I'm going to invite us to do some homework, to start to move into that consciousness. Would you be willing to move into that consciousness? Yes. More so? Okay. And for some of you, you're going to say this thing that I would say, I don't know how. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, David, but I have no idea how. You know what? I don't either. Fortunately, I know what does. And it's that consciousness within and all around us. And so I become willing to have that work through me to allow this dream to become present on this planet. One of the stated intentions, the stated dreams of this entire Center for Spiritual Living organization worldwide is to create a world that works for everyone. A world that works for everyone. How would that be? Would you be in alignment with that? And again, we go back and say, but how? See, that's where we get stuck. We get stuck in the how, don't we? We get this big vision, and our intellectual mind goes, yeah, but I don't know how to do that, and so we stop. How about if we're willing to have it happen? How about if we're willing to be places where it opens up, where we are open enough to let that vision begin to emerge through us? Would you be willing to do that? Yes. Okay. All it takes is willingness. And as I worked with a person on the class this Wednesday night, and I asked her, at one point in time, would you be willing? And she said, no, I'm not so sure, but for something that she was working on. And I said, okay, would you be willing to be willing? Well, maybe. Would you be willing to become willing to be willing? Yeah, I can do that. So it might be just that you're willing to become willing to be willing to have this emerge through you. And that's enough. It's like if we open the door just a crack, Spirit will come through it. and move through it and move through us. So that's what I invite you to do this week, is to be willing to have this kind of a vision of a world of greater love, of greater compassion, of greater respect, and of greater independence to come through you. 3 practices to support that. Number 1, listen to the inner voice. Take the time to listen to the inner voice. See, these people who signed their names to it, it was important enough to them, their independence was important enough to them, that they laid everything on the line. Other people said, business as usual is more important to me. There's no right or wrong with that, but just notice that people that we honor. We don't remember too many of the names of the Tories, do we? But we can tell you some of the signers of the Declaration of Independence to this day. Are you willing to put that much emphasis? Are you willing to make your freedom important enough that you will take the time to listen to the inner voice? Thank you. That's step number 1. Step number 2, ask questions. When you're listening to this inner voice, it's okay to ask it questions. Number 1 question, where in my life do I need to change? Number 2 question, to balance that out, where in my life do I need greater stability? See, we don't want a life that's constantly in change, do we? Where everything's constantly in motion. You've met a few people like that, okay? We also don't want the life that nothing ever moves. We've met a few people like that. You want something that has a healthy balance of change and stability. So where in my life do I need to change, and where do I need greater stability? And then finally, number 3, become willing to act out of love and respect towards yourself and others. Begin to welcome the evolution instead of the revolution. For those of you who were here last week with Esther Nicholson, that's opening up to the ivory invitations and the pink invitations instead of the red invitations. For those of you who weren't here, you can probably gather the context from that. The red ones are what we like to call the 2x4s or the Mack trucks, running through your life, okay? You begin to hear Spirit more gently, and it becomes easier to start to shift. So that's your homework for this week. Number 1, listen to the inner voice. Number 2, ask it some questions. And number 3, become willing to act out of love and respect towards yourself and others. Would you be willing to do that? Yes. Yay. Me too. So we're going to play with that this week and see if we can't create a world of greater interdependence that works for all of us. Let's move into prayer. And so I recognize that there is that one ineffable, infinite, that indescribable infinite that is beyond our minds, beyond our understanding of it. It includes our understanding, but it's beyond even that. As the Taoists would say, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. There's something far beyond any concept we have of that infinite presence. And yet we turn our attention into that, because it is also that which is greater than our lives, our appearance of our individual lives and our collective lives right now. Because we are one of that presence. We are one of that infinite. We're not separate from it. There is nothing between us. As Emerson says, we are inlets to the divine. We may become outlets, but we are inlets. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to buy it. We don't have to do anything for it. We are that one infinite presence in form as ourselves, as is everything and everyone around us. And so we begin to recognize the mirror that is life, the oneness that is life. And I speak my word that as we gain that recognition, as we open to that recognition, we begin to treat all the aspects of ourselves, which we call the other, with love, with respect, with caring, with compassion. We experience the life that we are, and we respect the life that is all around us. We open to the infinite love and let it have its way with us. We get, as Emerson says, our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. And so we let go of all the issues that other people like to spin up about. And we remember that God, and only God, is present. Even the part that likes to spin up. Even the part that loves its drama and trauma. All of this is us. And so we hold ourselves, all the aspects of ourselves, in love, both within and without. And that love is enough. That harmony, that recognition of the oneness is enough. And so for this I'm grateful for each person who takes part in this experiment, this great experiment of interdependence. I'm ever so grateful. For the spirit that moves in, through, and as it all, I'm grateful. And so we allow it to unfold with Spirit's guidance in the most beautiful, perfect ways possible. We turn it over to that which we call the law, that process of unfolding, that process of creation, and we let it be. Recognizing it because we have declared it and intended it to be so, that it must be so. Whether it takes a long time, whether it takes a short time, it must be so, because it is the nature that we will all remember our oneness and awaken to that. So knowing that that is the truth, we simply affirm it by saying together, and so it is. Thank you.
To love, serve.